The Oregon Ducks are set to begin spring practice this week in Eugene, and we're going to talk about it on today's episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast. It's Monday, March 11th, 2024. That was almost a lot of 20s. Oh my God. And we are coming to you from Long Beach, California. Super excited to have you guys along. Thank you for stopping by to talk some Duck football. I'm not rolling solo today. I'm joined by Tyson Alger, the publisher of the I-5 Corridor. Tyson, how we doing, man? Thanks for being here.
Man, Max, I kind of wish I was in Long Beach, California right now. It's been a little chilly up here the last couple of weeks, but I'm definitely ready for spring ball to get going, because that's generally the sign. It's like spring ball gets going, basketball tournaments get started. It kind of feels like we're gearing up for everything here. So this is a good place to be.
Well, it's weird that this kind of start of the year, we've been getting a pretty decent amount of rain out here in Long Beach. So it hasn't necessarily resembled your typical sunny Southern California. But I think this week it's turning around to get a little bit better. But I love the rain, so I'm not really complaining. But man, yeah, it's going to be exciting to kind of get to write about Duck football again. Feels like it's been a pretty long off season, even for someone like myself who covers recruiting. But I mean, before we get going, I just wanted to kind of give you a chance to peel back the curtain and let us know what you have going on right now at I-5 Corridor.
Yeah, man, this has been an awesome kind of start to the year for us so far, because we kind of debuted our I-5 Corridor 2.0, which I'm putting in loose quotes, but was essentially just saying that I'm doing this full time now. And while we're still doing a lot of Oregon stuff during this off season, we've kind of been expanding I've been doing some Timbers coverage, which has been fascinating as somebody who has just basically exclusively covered college football and college football and basketball for the last decade. Like, it's been kind of fun to dip my toes in those waters. But this Oregon team still has so many good offseason stories too. I wrote a profile on running backs coach Carlos Lachlan about 2 weeks ago that ever since that dude joined the staff, like, he's just been a quote machine. And I really kind of wanted to kind of peel back the layers a little bit and find out like how that was created. And that was probably one of my favorite stories that I've written over the last 2 years. So if anybody's looking for, a sample of my coverage, I made that one free too. So I think if you look back about 2 weeks ago, I think the headline to it was, here's why Oregon's running backs don't fumble. And that was why I wanted to write that story in the first place. It's because if you look over the last 2 years, I think running backs have lost one fumble, which is insane. And the story ends up diving into just like the relationships Lachlan builds with his running backs, and fumbling is important to him. So it's important to his running back. So that was kind of a fun one to write.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, you guys go make sure to give that one a read and check Tyson out at the I-5 Corridor. You can also give him a follow on Twitter or X at Tyson Alger. So we're going to talk about the running backs. Don't get too worried. We'll talk about the backs today, but let's start things off talking about the Oregon quarterback room. Seems like the position that always has the most anticipation, the most excitement around it as we kind of head into this part of the calendar year. Tyson, you know the roster as well as I do, but just to get people up to speed, you bring in Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma, and you also bring in former five-star Dante Moore from UCLA as the Ducks pull off a pretty spectacular feat in the transfer portal, landing two of the top available guys. You also bring in 2024 quarterback Luke Moga, a speedster, really intriguing quarterback from Phoenix, Arizona, and then you return Austin Novosad, who played a little bit for you last year, mainly in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. But those are the guys that we're looking at. Tyson, what do we think of this room?
I mean, obviously you need to see what it fully looks like once the pads come on and the games start counting. But I think you could probably make an argument that going into a spring, this is as deep and probably as comfortable as an Oregon quarterback room has been since I've been on the beat. And then that goes back to at least 2014 when Marcus Mariota was the starter and Jeff Locke was the backup. And I would argue that Dante Moore is a bit of a better backup than Jeff Locke was for the Ducks back then.
Just a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, and even kind of going down the list too, because like you heard positive stories about Austin's development last year. Luke Moga is such an intriguing prospect too. I talked to him, I think it was back in December, or it might have been January, just about what it's like being a quarterback that just signed with Oregon that is kind of the also ran, because you're getting the headlines of Dylan Gabriel coming in, you're getting Dante Moore coming in, and this kid wants to come in and compete too, and he's offers something that's far different than what the other guys do with just his sheer athleticism. So yeah, I mean, I hate to say it's plug and play with Gabriel to Nix, because what Nix did the last 2 seasons at Oregon was top 3 Oregon quarterbacks of all time in terms of production for those 2 years. In my opinion, I think Nix was as good as we've seen. So I think you got to give, a little bit of some respect to the degree of difficulty of that. But Gabriel was the best quarterback on the market. They got him. He's as experienced as anybody in the country. He's as efficient as anybody in the country. And if you look at the way Oregon's offense has run the last couple of years, efficiency is absolutely key. And so if he's still hovering around that 70% completion percentage, this Oregon offense is only going to keep revving up, especially with some of the skill players that they've been adding at wide receiver and all over the place.
It's really hard not to be excited and pretty high on the Ducks heading into the 2024. I mean, the discussion this offseason has in large part, Tyson, been not so much can Oregon be competitive in the Big Ten, but are they maybe even the favorites? And we're talking about some great teams like Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, obviously, but that's really where this roster is at. And I think you have to have confidence if you're an Oregon fan, because quarterback's not a question mark. And I think that Dylan Gabriel, to your point, incredibly experienced and incredibly productive and efficient, but we don't know that it's necessarily going to be 100% smooth sailing. I think when you look at Bo Nix's transition from Auburn to Oregon, he had that reunion with Kenny Dillingham to maybe help smooth things over a little bit. But obviously he was an absolute stud because he switched another OC the following year and still put up great numbers and even found himself in New York for the Heisman ceremony. So I think that you obviously have to be super excited about what Dylan Gabriel brings. I'm personally excited to see him maybe a little bit more just because he's a lefty. I've never really gotten to cover a left-handed quarterback. I think he's really a gamer and someone that just gives you a shot in any game as long as he is calling the shots and running your offense. But I think a little bit maybe more where the interesting storyline for me is after Dylan Gabriel with Dante Moore. He was, I think, the highest rated recruit at quarterback, at least, to ever commit to the Ducks. And then we all know that he went to UCLA after Kenny Dillingham's departure. But the point that I'm kind of curious to pick your brain about, Tyson, is maybe just looking at the backup position for Oregon. Dante Moore, I think, has more quality experience than potentially a Ty Thompson did while he was at Oregon. And he only played 1 year of college ball. And that's no slight to Ty at all. I mean, super admirable how he stuck around. And he obviously deserves all the praise in the world, wishing them nothing but the best at Tulane. But you have an incredibly gifted quarterback who has already seen more quality reps than your primary backup for the past 2 years. And I think that's huge.
I think it's especially important as you move into this Big Ten era, where if you look at the schedule, I mean, it's if you take an injury at quarterback and you don't have a competent backup, like your season's toast. Like just in October and November of next year, the Ducks have, I think, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Washington. In past years, if you lose Bo Nix during that stretch, like that's the end of your playoff run. And, with the expanded playoff too, you're going to be able to absorb like maybe 1 extra loss, maybe 2 extra losses like this era. Like you want to be able to like stay in contention. So I think, obviously more signing, I think a lot of people look towards 2025 and 2026 of like when he becomes the starter. But I also think this is kind of maybe how these teams in these super conferences try to move forward as well, of having a tested backup. So that way you can at least still compete, because especially if you look at Oregon's roster right now, this roster is ready to go. Like it's like, that's why they went out and got Dylan Gabriel and put him in there and didn't just get Dante Moore. It's, this team has playoff, like even old school playoff potential if you go back to the Final Four for next year. So I think it's it's a safeguard for this direct next season. And I think it was a pretty brilliant play by the Ducks to secure that.
Anytime you have that connection, that in or that opportunity, you owe it to yourself as a coaching staff and as a program to pursue it. You're going to go out and get players that can make your team better. That's just the way it works. But obviously, those additions at quarterback are going to be under a little bit more of a microscope than some other positions, especially with Dante being a former 5-star and all the noise that kind of comes with that. But I totally agree with your point. You got to be ready. And if you, I think just having a guy that you can turn to that has played quality in-game reps is just more comfortable with the speed of the game. That's going to help you.
The thing that I just kind of wonder is, when do you think is going to be the next time that a freshman that comes in that Oregon recruited ends up becoming the starter? Just because we're in such an era now where if you can keep all the rest of your roster to a certain stacked level, which is kind of what Oregon's doing right now, they got 5 stars behind the kids that are starting, does a team at that level ever take the time to actually break a guy in, or does it just make sense to always kind of go bring in a Gabriel, bring in a Dante Moore, guys that kind of have proven themselves a little bit, just so you don't have that risk factor when everything else is up to a certain caliber,
It's certainly a question that I've pondered myself and been asked a number of times, as someone who covers recruiting, because it's not that you don't want to recruit a top guy from high school, and Oregon's going to continue to recruit top guys from high school, but it just makes you wonder, as all these top tier teams for the most part go the transfer portal route, when are these guys going to get their shot? And I think it's going to become more and more difficult unless you can stand out like an absolute beast, like right away, like right when you're getting to campus. Because I think if you're even looking at Oregon right now, I guess you would probably look at Achilles Smith Jr. in 2026, maybe. I mean, I think the plan for him is to come in redshirt and then compete for the job alongside a Dante Moore, Austin Novosad, a Luke Moga. But I think it's also just going to depend on, who the best athlete is, because a lot of the times that's, I think, what it comes down to. But I don't know. It's like, I don't really think that Dante is necessarily going to push Dylan Gabriel for the starting job, but I'm really interested in that backup role, even more so because of what you said. Like, he could very well find his number called.
I think it'll be a fascinating relationship between those two. Not that I expect them to be like adversarial or anything. Like, I think it's pretty clear, like the established, jobs that each of them has, but to have a backup quarterback that has that experience and maybe knows what he's trying, or knows what he needs to learn per se. Like, it'll be fascinating for Dante to just be able to have that opportunity to kind of pick Gabriel's brain and just kind of, just see how much he can benefit from that. Cause like, I don't expect him to push him for the starting job. I think a quarterback coming in with 5 years of experience and then as many completions as Gabriel has, I think he'll do a pretty good job during spring and summer to establish themselves. But I think that's the real kind of benefit here, is you kind of have like an on-the-job tutoring of for a guy that has shown that he can play. He just needs to get better.
Well, we could talk so much more about the quarterback spot, but there's some more positions that we got to get to on today's pod, Tyson. So let's move it on to the running backs. The rich get richer, embarrassment of riches. These are kind of cliches, but I think it really applies to Oregon at the running back spot, because they have this crazy collection of talent. And just to kind of get people up to speed, some of the names we're looking at here: Jordan James, Noah Whittington. You also have Dejon Riggs, who came in as a member of the 2024 class, and then Jay Harris from Northwest Missouri State. Not necessarily a school you find yourself hearing too much about, but my biggest kind of question here, or thought process, is I don't know if Noah Whittington is necessarily a shoo-in for that number one back role, and not through any fault of his own. I mean, the guy got banged up and knocked out for the year against Colorado, but just because of how stinking good Jordan James has played.
Dude, first, I'm going to say Bucky Irving was probably the most fun running back that I've covered at Oregon. And I missed LaMichael James by a year. Royce Freeman was a better running back, but for kind of the extent of his college career. But the stuff that Bucky Irving would do was just jaw dropping at times, and some of the way that he could kind of shift and accelerate. It kind of reminded you of some of those Oregon running backs of old. So Bucky Irving's very high in my opinion level. Towards the end of the season, I was asking, like, why don't they give Jordan James the ball more? Like, that's like how much that I like Jordan James. Like that, I think he's got Bucky's kind of shiftiness, but he's got this explosiveness to him too, especially in kind of short yardage stuff that, I think Whittington's got a lot of pressure on him this spring and summer to really, show that he's come back from that injury and he's healthy. Because I think Jordan James has 100% lead back potential. And then if you kind of look at the recruits and the players that Carlos Laughlin's brought in, this guy right now is on like a hot streak that we haven't seen since like Gary Campbell. Like every dude he's brought in is averaging at least like 6.5 yards per carry. Like it's everybody is effective in this offense, in this scheme. So I kind of just have faith in what they do. There were times last year where you kind of want them to just feed a guy more, like let a guy get 25 touches, just let him go off. But they really do spread it out, and it seems like that they're really able to keep that effective level throughout, the first, second, and third tier of running backs that have been coming through.
And I also don't want to forget about Jaden Lamar, who enters his second year with the Ducks. Kind of had a little brain fart there, but definitely wanted to mention him as a guy to keep an eye on here. I think the approach is probably going to be that three-headed monster, which I think was the plan last year until Noah got hurt. And you maybe found yourself asking for a little bit, is Jordan James ready for that bigger role? Because he played a lot as a true freshman, but you never really got to see him open it up. He was a short yardage guy, third down, goal line, whatever it is. But he proved that he was more than ready for that role and then some. So I am super excited about Jordan James. We kind of know what Noah is. I mean, I was excited to see how he would do with his kind of beefed up frame at I think 5'8", 5'9", 196, or he put on some significant weight. I'm kind of blanking on the exact number, but he's a guy that I think didn't lose a step when he added that weight. He's really valuable out of the backfield, and I think has a great top gear. But Jay Harris might be the biggest question mark in that room right now, not because you have any question of his ability. Like we were just talking about, Tyson, to your point, you got to trust Carlos Laughlin's eye for talent. If you're an Oregon fan right now, I mean, he has literally shown you no reason not to. I don't even think you can mention Dante Dowdell because he just didn't get the opportunity. We didn't see him get the carries. And that's just because this room has been so good. But Jay Harris is kind of that bigger back that enters the mix. I think he was listed at 6'2", 215 for last year. And the dude put up, I want to say like 1,400 yards. And I think the question for him is maybe just how effective can he be as a bigger back in the passing game, because we just didn't really see it too much from him at Northwest State, at least according to the stats. But that film is a little hard to get. So you got to be super stoked on what this room looks like. You have two pretty proven commodities. And then the guys that you don't know so much about, you're kind of giving Laughlin the benefit of the doubt, which I think he's definitely earned.
It's funny when the fan base likes a coach, how much more of the benefit of the doubt you get when it's like you're pulling in this kid from D2 to like throw into a running back room for a school that's about to head into like the Big Ten. But then kind of start to look at the stats and the accolades, like, oh, All-American, and he's a bigger back too. Like I could see how they could fit in, it's basically you're more willing to agree with all like the positive traits other than like that. I can't imagine what it would be like for him running in a game last year versus like, next season when you're in the big house and, there's 100,000 people. I can't wait to write that story because I'm sure it's going to be a crazy experience for him. But I like that the variety that gives too. It kind of reminds me a little bit back when, the Ducks were running like Travis Dye out there with CJ Verdell, but then he would bring in like Cyrus for, to just munch touchdowns there at the end. What did that kid end up having? Like 18 touchdowns on like 25 career. I'm making that up.
Crazy fantasy value.
Something ridiculous like that, like all-time touchdown vulture.
Yeah. So you got a lot of different possibilities, I think, for this running back room this year. And I think we've already touched on some pretty good stuff, but I wanted to give you the mic a little bit here, Tyson, to maybe peel back a little bit of the secret sauce, if you will. I don't know if you're cool with giving away the answer, but can you maybe break it down a little bit why Oregon's running backs don't tend to fumble under Laughlin?
Yeah. So actually, let me pull up this story because I want to make sure I get some of the names right. But Yeah. So Lachlan, he grew up, his uncle Ray kind of taught him how to play football, and just kind of like the relationships that he had there. And this dude would like come to all of his games, and like he just knew like how much it meant to him to like have that like somebody there and supporting him all the time. So like Lachlan's really kind of carried himself throughout his career of like just like knowing like, yeah, like knowing like the technical stuff of like carrying that ball high up on your breastplate, and not all over the place is, like the technical stuff is important. But he's also just like, throughout his coaching style, he knows that if you want something done, you have to establish a relationship and cultivate that with the players and kind of be on the same wavelength. So even if it's something as simple as like, hey, like take care of the football, we want to make sure you like, that's an important part of our team. Lachlan kind of just said like, they don't fumble because they know it's important to me. And they've kind of created this whole like running backs room where they're very competitive, but they're all, he said they all, if you talk to them, they all sound the same. Like they're all on like kind of the same wavelength. They're all just kind of cohesive in one thing. And they hate fumbling. They hate turnovers. Like it's a very positive yardage group. Like they don't even get caught for in the backfield that often. And so it's, yeah, it's kind of, you'll have to read the story a little bit to see how I stuck the landing, because I'm not sure if I'm doing it quite well here, but
No
yeah,
worries.
yeah.
Yeah, so definitely go, like I said at the top of the show, go ahead to the I-5 corridor and give that one a read. Tyson's doing some tremendous work over there, so definitely want to support him. The running backs are, I mean, it's not even like I don't want to talk about them, but it's just, you have no reason to doubt that room at all.
Right. There's not a whole lot of questions. Like it's you kind of, I'm expecting one of the two, either James or Whittington, to rush for probably about 1,100 yards. I'm expecting the other guy to go for about 700, and then kind of distribute the rest from there.
Let's move on to a position with, I wouldn't even necessarily say question marks, but just a lot of intrigue and maybe even a little bit of mystery. Let's talk about the wide receivers under Junior Adams. The Ducks obviously lose Troy Franklin, a historic record-setting receiver, to the NFL draft. And now they have to look for some new guys to step up. And they obviously went into the portal to get a big name in Texas A&M standout, Evan Stewart. And then you have some guys coming back: Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant Jr., Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper, Justice Lowe, the Portland area guy. So there's plenty of talent in this room. I think the question maybe becomes who's that new number one guy in Troy Franklin's departure and his absence, and then who from these younger guys that we haven't really heard from a whole lot can kind of step up.
It certainly helps if you're losing Troy Franklin to return a guy who had more catches than Troy Franklin last year. I know Tez Johnson wasn't quite like the yardage compiler and touchdown machine that maybe Franklin was throughout his career. But what did Tez have? Like 84 catches last season?
I think it was 86. I'm looking it up right now.
Something ridiculous.
86 for 1182.
Yeah. So it's if you look at the actual returning production, like, from him, from Trayshawn Holden, from Gary Bryant Jr., like the amount of like catches and proven and kind of like the proven commodity of this receivers room is still actually pretty darn good when you take into account like the full load. It will be interesting to see like what sort of chemistry Tez does have with Dylan. Obviously it was 1 year at Oregon for Tez, but it was with a quarterback he was fairly familiar with Bo Nix. I don't know if you've heard, but they knew each other a little bit before college, before they got to Oregon. They were brothers.
No way.
Yeah,
oh
I don't.
God.
Sorry, I don't want to.
We gotta stop recording. We gotta write this right now.
So yeah, I think Tez is going to do just fine. Man, Trayshawn Holden showed some like flashes last year that made me think that he could really take over. I mean, even if you just look at like that last ditch play in the Pac-12 championship game when the guy was like holding his jersey, and it's just like that guy could be a beast. So I think Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson are going to be kind of commanding like the bulk of it. But like Gary Bryant Jr. wasn't bad last year either. Like to have that as like kind of like a third, fourth option. Jurion Dickey, they keep just bringing in so many other guys. Like Oregon's wide receivers for the longest time when I was on the beat, it was always kind of like which like 3-star gem might like shine out and like kind of like become like the dude. Dylan Mitchell, like out of nowhere. I mean, Dylan Mitchell was a 4-star, but like that was like the best receiver Justin Herbert ever threw to. And I don't think Dylan Mitchell would probably be a top 3 option on this team. It's just fascinating how that depth and how the skill players have really evolved for Oregon, because for the longest time it was kind of like fit and system and how guys fit within that scheme. And now it's just like they're going out and getting like 5-star dudes who can haul down 80 passes a year.
Yeah, and that's part of what I wrote over on Ducks Digest in my preview of this position. You've been on the beat longer than I have, Tyson, but I feel like there's been a pretty apparent transformation in the caliber of talent that they've been able to attract and ultimately land, sign, enroll, whatever you want to say. And I think that kind of started with Brian McClendon, even though Oregon wasn't necessarily, I shouldn't say that, they were by no means a power, like a passing heavy, proficient offense when he was there, because we know how much Mario Cristobal liked to run the ball. But Brian McClendon signed Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton, and Isaiah Brevard. Those were 3 All-Americans when they came out of high school. And then you look at what they did to close out the 24 class after bringing in Jurion Dickey as a 5-star in 23. You flip a pair of All-Americans from USC, a SoCal guy at that, and Ryan Pelham, and then Jeremiah McClellan from Ohio State. Like that in itself, flipping a wide receiver from Ohio State is nothing to scoff at with the success that they've had under Brian Hartline. And then you're saying, maybe we want a little bit more. Let's just go get Evan Stewart, another former 5-star guy out of the portal. So the ceiling, and I think you could probably say the floor for this group are really high. But for me, I really want to see what Jurion Dickey can do, just because he's a Bay Area guy. I got to go home and cover his commitment in person when he became a Duck. And I also want to see if I think it's kind of a make it or break it year for Kyler Casper, the tallest wideout in the room, and a guy who just looked like a physical freak coming out of high school.
That's kind of one of the guys that I think about a lot too, because I do think, kind of going back to the quarterback discussion we had earlier of like, when are you going to like, have that homegrown quarterback that like enters into the system? Kyler Casper, they signed him, and I think especially at that position where you can bring in a bunch of guys, like you're always going to have about 3 or 4 guys added on the depth chart every offseason. And I think, it's going to be make or break, because I think this is certainly a dude who could contribute somewhere. Like he's got a lot of talent, he's got a lot of potential, but Oregon has just turned into one of the most attractive transfer destinations. Like in the if you're going to be a perennial top 10 team, and if you're a little bit unique like the Ducks are, and you're doing well in the NIL sphere and all those sorts of things, like it is a challenge, and you have to be very committed to your own talents to go up and sign at a place as a freshman somewhere. And so, I think it's a very important spring for like those dudes, those ones that, we saw in those signing classes a couple of years ago, and, everyone's excited about. Now this is going to be this is going to be the spring that kind of determines whether or not they're going to be the Ducks that they're cheering for the next couple of years or not.
And with Jurion, I think he's finally going to be a full go. I know that there was some discussion last season that his injury that he suffered his senior year of high school kind of that recovery bled into his true freshman year a little bit. But I mean, look at the talent that he was going to have to compete with. So not to say that he couldn't have made some noise even if he was healthy, but like, we just want to see what he's like at 100%.
I also want to see, no, I don't expect this to produce anything actually on the foot, like in the fall, but I want to see like what Michael Williams looks like out there. They brought him in from the track. He's one of the fastest guys, like legitimately one of the fastest guys in the country. We've seen crossover before from the football to the track side. We don't often see like the reverse side there. So, those are always kind of like those fun spring stories. I remember, I think it was the 2017 when Dwayne Benjamin came over from the basketball side. It was like after the Final Four run, and he did spring football with the Ducks, and I think that lasted about a week, maybe 2 practices. It turns out getting hit when you're like 6'8" hurts a bit, but
for sure. Well, we're almost at 30 already, Tyson, but we still have a couple more positions. So I just wanted to check in with you. How are you doing on time? Do we need to kind of kick it into high gear a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be a little less long-winded. So.
Okay, like 10 minutes, or what do you think?
Yeah. If we could do about 10 here, that's solid.
Perfect. Rolling right along with the tight ends. This group is one that I think is a little bit easier to talk about because we have two very known commodities at the top in Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert, who returned for their final years of college football. The Ducks did lose Casey Kelly to the transfer portal. He is now at East Carolina, but I don't really think that's a huge loss because he didn't do a whole lot while he was at Oregon. But they also have Kenyon Sadiq, who enters his second year with the Ducks, and they signed a pair of true freshmen in Roger Saliapaga and AJ Pugliano. So I think, kind of like I said, you know what you have in T. Ferg and Patrick Herbert, who has now logged 2 healthy seasons. So that's awesome news for him. Now I think it's a question of what kind of a leap can Kenyon Sadiq take, because he seems like a really special athlete in that room. And I love seeing the special ways that Will Stein got him involved, even in the limited snaps that he got as a true freshman.
I always do love when you have several like veteran tight ends, and then you can kind of work in like that talented guy with them. Like you can go back and look at some of Oregon's more talented tight end rooms, like even in like 2014 when they had like Johnny Munn, Evan Bayless, and Pharaoh Brown all together. And like, man, like just to be able to kind of have that triple threat there. And it's so nice for them to be able to return Terrence Ferguson and just have that like known commodity. I mean, like, this guy's going to probably catch about 50 balls. He's probably going to go about for 500 yards. When it's all said and done, he's probably going to be one of the better Oregon tight ends of all time. And I think he's done it very quietly. There's been a lot of talented guys around him, and he just kind of goes about his business, but he's been productive since he got here. And then to mix, it's been so nice to see a healthy Patrick Herbert. He's not the guy that's going to go out and, necessarily dazzle, but like that kid's a freak. He's kind of been a physical freak since like even when he was in high school. I remember watching some of his Sheldon games and watching that body style play against Oregon high school competition. It just wasn't all that fair. So I think that's an awfully good 1-2 combo. Let's see what like Sadiq can add to that group. But yeah, just a very veteran, talented group for the Ducks at tight end there.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, if we're talking about Patrick Herbert, let me just share this gem of a play. For those watching on YouTube against Wazoo, we got Bucky Irving out of the backfield, and then Patrick Herbert just decleats a guy. Maybe he wasn't completely looking, but still some style points there en route to a win for the Ducks.
The thing I love about Patrick too is, anytime you were standing around Justin, the Hatfield down conflicts, you're just like, man, this guy is huge. Thank God this guy plays quarterback, because he could really hurt some people. And then you see Patrick, and it's just basically Justin playing a non-quarterback position, and you kind of see the physics results there when he's throwing his shoulders around.
And for a guy who comes in, and I don't even know how many times he was asked about his brother in the year that Justin was coming out. I think it's been great to see him really be able to kind of blaze his own trail and just show, like you were talking about, hey, I can do this football thing too.
The hardest thing I think for him had to have been, Justin was at his most famous kind of when Patrick was either a redshirt or a redshirt freshman. And yeah, Justin was really good from the get-go as like a prodigy quarterback. He might end up being in the Hall of Fame. Like, other players take time to develop. And so I think there was a lot of like, why isn't Patrick, this good right now? Why isn't Patrick as good as Justin? And, so it was very easy to just do you're Justin's little brother thing. And, we kind of went through that a little bit too with the Mariotas at Oregon. Matt Mariota didn't end up playing a whole lot for the Ducks. And so I thought it was unfair that Patrick kind of got thrown into that on occasion. And now that you've seen, as he's gotten healthy and as he's gotten reps and as he's gotten confidence and as he's kind of really, found himself within that position, like he's going to be pretty darn good this year. Like he's a very solid addition to a front running Big Ten football team.
My guy to watch in this room is true freshman Roger Saliapaga, who comes to Oregon from the state of Utah, Orem High School, where the Ducks found Noah Sewell. And I don't necessarily think he's going to play a whole lot right away, but I think he was used in a lot of similar ways to Terrence Ferguson coming out of high school, just kind of a jumbo wide receiver, tight end hybrid, super athletic, able to make some big plays, and is hard to bring down. So definitely keep an eye on Roger Saliapaga at tight end. Last, but certainly not least, Tyson, we got to talk about that O-line under Alik Terry, Mike Cavanaugh, and company. Ryan Walk, now back on the staff as well for 2024. Kind of a cool storyline as a former player. But man, this group, they were a Joe Moore Award finalist last year. You lose Jackson Powers Johnson to the draft, and then you also lose Stephen Jones from this group last year. But I think this group is still locked and loaded because you got Iapani Pancho Laulaulu taking over at center. You got him his first start in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty, and he looked great. And then you also have both of your tackles returning with Josh Connerly Jr. and Johnny Cornelius. Marcus Harper II probably slides in at left guard again. And then Matthew Bedford comes over from Indiana by way of Colorado. Brief verbal commitment there. So this group looks great. And now you want to see how they can develop behind him.
It was funny because going into last season, I remember, you kind of start paging through the season previews and predictions, and the big thing for Oregon was, well, they're losing Alex Forsyth, they're losing Ryan Walk, they're losing all these starters from a very good 2022 team. That's going to be the big question mark for the Ducks. And I think you can make an argument that last year's offensive line was even better than the one from the year before. I mean, to be able to slide Jackson in there and and basically get one of the best offensive line seasons in Oregon history, go out and win the Remington, that's awfully impressive. And so now you're probably going to see a lot of people saying the same thing. You got to replace Jackson Powers Johnson, you got to do that. But just the way that Oregon's recruited on the line for the last, at this point, last 6 years, they have so much depth there. It's been a focus for this program for so long that it's not even plug and replace. Sometimes it's plug and get better. And so I think when you bring back the core that they do have, and you're able to replace, Jackson with Pancho, and you're able to see what, kind of the comfort level he had at that position during the bowl game. I think the offensive line is just going to be a bear again. I think Alik Terry is one of the best position coaches in the country. And I would like to be a skill player running behind those dudes.
And oh my God, I would too. You'd have some crazy.
They wouldn't like it in the inverse, they'd probably have to carry the load a little bit more than you have Alger back there other than Bucky Irving. But I think I could get 2 yards per carry.
Maybe. Oregon certainly has that luxury with experience at pretty much every spot except for center with Pancho, but that's just because he's young and he hasn't played a whole lot. But even before he got his first start at center, he was playing a tremendous amount as a true freshman, enough to earn, All-American honors from, 247 and probably some other recognition from from other outlets. But now you got to see how guys like Dave Iuli and George Silva and Pancho's older brother, Faupe Laulaulu, how they can kind of maybe factor into the mix here. But again, you don't, it's not a question mark. You're not worried. And man, I don't really know how the O-line's looking in Eugene this year. It should be another really, really solid group.
Max, I want to give you some props here. And maybe this is because you're more in the recruiting circles and you have to call a lot more people, but you take on the names with vowels with such confidence and you nail them every time. I'll go first names a whole lot just because I don't want to disrespect guys by screwing it up. And you do a very good job with it.
Oh, I appreciate it. I know I don't get it perfect all the time. I just feel like, if I've been writing it and saying it enough times, I should know how to say it. I'm going to go with another one that I've said quite a bit. He's not even at Oregon anymore, but Malisela Amavai Leulu. That's another one that I've gotten relatively comfortable with.
That my first job for a year and a half, I worked on Kauai, Hawaii, and it was doing high school sports reporting down there. It was I was very diligent to make sure that I had all the vowels right and the akinas and everything. And I probably looked like a fool most of the time when I was trying to pronounce a dude's name. So I apologize to anyone on the great island of Kauai for my ignorance back then.
Right on. Well, we're both doing the best that we can. Tyson, any final thoughts here before we get you out of here? Just looking at Oregon's offense. I'll tackle the defense later this week.
Man, this is such just like a gut thing. I can't put this to stats. It's just you cover the beat for a long time and you kind of get a feel kind of going into a spring and a season. And this, I think the Bo Nix era at Oregon for Dan Lanning, I think that might have been the prologue. I think that might have been the run up to whatever this debut this season is going to be, because they got their guys in there now. They have so much continuity on the coaching staff. holy cow, Oregon's got both its coordinators back for a change. Like, when was the last time that happened? So I'm very high on this season, and I know people, will like to say, like, you guys cover the team, you guys run sites about the team, it's in our best interest for the team to be good, and that's completely right. But also, I'm not making that up. Like, I think Oregon's going to be very, very good this year, and there are a lot of answers to if things go wrong. We talked about at quarterback, if it goes wrong, you have a backup there. We talked, at running back, you have 3 potential number 1 guys. At wide receiver, you have 5 stars jockeying for position. This is a very good sign for Oregon as they go into the Big Ten.
This is a really complete and deep roster for the Ducks. Maybe they'll look for a couple more answers along the D line, as the spring goes on, but we'll have to see there. You still got a bunch of guys that you recruited out of high school that were some high-level players, but I'll continue on the podcast to talk about the defense later on this week. But Tyson, before we get you out of here, just let the people know where they can find you. Just wanted to kind of give you the floor to plug anything.
Yeah, if anybody wants to check us out, we're i5corridor.com. You can do a dash, or I've gotten rid of the dash too, so whichever way. I'm going to be down in Eugene tomorrow for Pro Day. I kind of want to write a piece on just kind of the end of kind of what we just talked about, kind of the end of the Bo Nix era, and how important he was for not only the play on the field, but just kind of establishing kind of the landing era in Eugene. So kind of putting a bow on that. I apologize for that one. And then we're going to be kind of diving into conference tournament coverage here as well. So I'm not going to Vegas this year, unfortunately, but we'll certainly be watching.
Well, you guys make sure you tap in with Tyson and check out the great work he's doing. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at mtorresports, same name on Instagram. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres, and read me over on ducksdigest.com. But thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to talk some ball with us. Extra thank you to Tyson for coming by, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.